and welcome to episode 4 of the FM Notebook with me, your host, Gaffer Gramo. Once again, I'm on my own, but as many of you guys out there have said, it's refreshing. It's a different podcast idea, just to have a single voice on hosting podcast duties. But of course, the podcast doesn't last without your interaction, so thank you to all those people who've interacted and I've spoken with over the past week. Your feedback has been very welcome. And your feedback, of course, has been very, very welcome as well. As in the planning stages of this podcast, before episode 1 was recorded about a month ago now, I said I'd go 5 episodes into the podcast, no matter what happened each week. I'd go 5 episodes, I'd gauge the reaction and have a chat with people in the community and see what they thought. And from there, the decision would be made to see where the podcast would continue. So thank you to all those people whose feedback I've already heard from. For those of you who haven't spoken yet or do have your own ideas, feel free to share them. Of course, I'm always willing to listen. I'm always willing to find new ways for the podcast to grow and to find its place and see if it does have a continued place in the FM community. Obviously, the standards out there of the other podcasts are very high, and for just me to be on my own talking into a microphone plugged into a laptop and hoping for the best each week, it can be a daunting task. But to all those people out there who've made the podcast feel like it is a valued place, thank you very much. And if there's any ways you feel that we could improve the podcast here, please let me know. So episode 4 has been titled Cracking the Top, you may have seen. So the idea behind this podcast came from the episode number that you'd think of, number 4 in football, and one of the first things that pops into my mind is the top 4 and the continued talk every season and even during the summer about the top 4. And of course, with the new Champions League rules coming into place from next season, where the top 4 in England and the other major European countries will automatically qualify for the group stages of the Champions League, finishing in the top 4 is now an even more lucrative prize. And another then coincidental aspect of talking about this topic is the success I've been having with Rayo Vallecano as well. In the past week, since I last talked to you, we managed to beat second place Granada 2-1 after coming from behind. Like we said last week, coming from behind, how we come from behind, we managed to successfully come from behind last in that game against Granada. 1-0 down at half time, went out and managed to eke a 2-1 win. So now we sit 10 points clear at the top of the Segunda, and we're just about to enter the run-in. So obviously thoughts of, with a cushion that big at the top, thoughts have already begun to drift towards planning for next season. So I put the question out there this week to see how people prepare, how people go about cracking into the top 4. Do they go for a more slow and steady process of building and building and building, and in a couple of seasons' time having a sustainable growth? Or do you go down the likes of the Leeds United route and just throw money at it? Hopefully the qualification happens, the money comes back in, and the success comes from that aspect there. But of course, there obviously is the danger of going that way. So, like as I alluded to there, with the save date, Rayo Vallecano has gone extremely well in the past week. We had a bit of a dry spell for Alan Jr., which was tough to try to come through, but he did manage to get on the score sheet, goal and an assist in that Granada game. So again, he now leads the league in top as the top goal scorer. It kind of feels like a bit like a cheat, the fact that we just have one player who's so prolific in front of goal, that where he has over 3 times the amount of goals at the second highest goal scorer for us. So it kind of feels a bit like we've managed to find like a little bit of a cheat in the game here, but not complaining. 10 points clear to top. Our goals for record is now the second best in the league, and we do boast the best defence. So again, I'm finding those ways back in the way I like to play Football Manager. These little details I do like to pay attention to. So that's a very pleasing aspect. It's also been a very, very unusual week as well. Like I've spoken about it before, but just continued job links as well with me in the game to take me elsewhere. When I started this save, I was unemployed, and Vallecano were the first club to offer me a job. So there is a journeyman aspect to this save. I'm not tied to sticking to Rayo Vallecano, but at the same time, I'm enjoying where I am right now, and I did write at the end of the blog post I published during the week on the tactics. Again, I'll speak about that a bit later on in the tactics and training section of the pod. But it's been, my head hasn't really been turned to leave Vallecano. A lot of the clubs linked with me are English clubs or Spanish clubs, and to be honest with you, if I was to leave Rayo, I'd look to leave Spain and at all costs really avoid England. I kind of find with the more money that's gone into the English side of the game, I've actually enjoyed the saves there less and less each season. It's just like I just haven't really found it as enjoyable. So if I do leave Rayo Vallecano, I am going to be looking to go elsewhere in Europe. I'm open to any other league, any other country. Again, I wouldn't rule out going back to Italy, even though the Sampdoria save earlier on this year didn't go too well. So, but I am enjoying the save and planning now for next season. Pablo Maffeo and Pedro Chirivella have actually extended their loans for another season with zero contribution. So I want to thank Liverpool and Manchester City for being so generous to allow them to stay. So, but like I said, the planning is already in stage, and that's really what this whole podcast is about: planning for the future. How do we go about building a club and a side that's going to go and crack into the top four? So, in the team report section, one of the other aspects as well is I also invite people in the community to send in a question. One of the questions that was sent in to me this week was actually talking about FM18 and even about FM19, and the idea of it was, like I said, was I am already looking elsewhere at Rayo Vallecano. Like, I'm not tied down to staying with this club, no matter, even though I am enjoying it right now. And the question said, well, FM18 approaching the halfway point of its life cycle, has there been a thought about FM19 yet? And to be sitting here in late April, early May, the football season, the traditional football season we have, is beginning to draw to a close. Although in Ireland here, the league is kind of up and running. We've just finished finishing the first cycle of games. So to be thinking of next season, and then there's already the next game of FM, which won't be out till November. It's a long way away, and obviously, any ideas you have now can change between now and then. But one approach I do consider, and one approach I have been considering, is places you've been on holiday and the local teams. I remember in the book FM Stole My Life, I remember hearing about a guy who convinced his then fiancée to book the honeymoon to go to Bulgaria, and while they were there, managed to wangle his way out to a football match to see the local team. Little to everybody else's knowledge that the local football team to where he was on honeymoon was the team he'd actually been managing in Football Manager. So that was something that kind of stuck with me a bit, and in the last couple of years and this year as well, the holiday is going to be to the US, to America, and the MLS. I kind of dabbled in FM Touch, and it's a very different type of football, a very different structure, and to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if it's a structure that I'd be 100% committed to, although I'd be interested in finding out more about the league and the league structure, the designated players, the drafts, as well as having your own academy. I don't think that going to these holiday destinations are ones that would attract me to manage a side that I'd visit these places. So again thinking of holidays places I've been recently, and fortunately enough, last year I was in Belgium and Holland on holiday, and where the first week we were in Belgium, and just 15 minutes up the road from us was the town of Roeselare. Does anybody out there who knows how to pronounce it correctly, please educate me. And it was just through research of them that I found that that this was a club who in 2005 were promoted to the Belgian First Division, and within a year or two it actually qualified for UEFA Cup places through the Belgian League. And now in 2018 they're back again down in the second division of German football, the second tier. So that's a save I'm currently thinking about at the moment. Obviously between now and then a lot can change. Obviously between even with Rayo Vallecano, I'm even thinking about where FM 18 I can go elsewhere. Is there anywhere else in FM 18 I could manage? But in FM 19, already that distance away, thinking about somewhere like Belgium, thinking about a side like Roselaar. I have the book as well. That's Reboot. I'd like to read. So I kind of think that if you're rebooting a club, Roselaar do sound like an interesting side to reboot and get back into European football. And I've never managed in Belgium as well, so that there is something then that does intrigue me. But it's also a question I'd have for you guys as well, is have you even thought about FM19 yet? Have you actually thought about next year in the game? Obviously the German licenses will be kicking in as well, so managing in Germany could be an even more attractive proposition next season. So, and I've managed in Germany, I'd certainly recommend it. So is there anybody else even out there that's thought about an FM19 save? Feel free to let us know. And how about you go about picking a side at the start of each FM every time it comes out? So now, kind of with all this forward planning and all this forward thinking going on, let's move into now the topic of the week. And the topic of the week, as we said at the top of the podcast and in the tweets as led up to this, is cracking the top. How do you go about building to crack the top teams? And now from my perspective, as I say here, it's something that I'd actually be open to advice from. I have taken teams before in FM from second tiers up to top tiers, and in some cases it's unfortunately for time restrictions and different factors that I've actually never been able to continue to save much longer. At the end of FM 16 I was the Bournemouth manager, and after keeping them up on the last day of the season, I spent heftily during the summer and actually bought 13 players in. I shipped a few guys out and went to start the season and ended up kind of falling flat. We never kicked on, the new players never bedded in, different factors there, and but I never got to figure that problem out, because by the time this save was happening, FM 17 had just arrived out, the bait had just dropped, and I dropped everything then to start fresh with Schalke. So that's my big question there is how about do you go about building to crack the top teams? And in looking and in planning, I look at my own notebook, hence the title of the podcast, the FM Notebook. It's coming from my own notes, my own my own questions that I have written down. So one of the big things I have then is obviously squad development. The star ratings we have in FM are very, very useful in squad building and assessing squads, that we can see how how good each player is in each squad compared to one another, and who the star players are. And obviously this is done also in comparison to the league you're in. And that's one thing I'm aware of, that some of the players I do have currently at Rayo Vallecano, where they might be 3 to 4 star players in the Segunda, when we make the step up to La Liga, to the Premier Division, is there going to be a drop off in quality, which of course is to be expected in a league of the highest standard. Are we going to see our squad level drop? Are we going to, and how are we going to cope with this? Where, like I said, Alan Jr. is our top goal scorer with 23, and our next top goal scorer has 6 goals. If when Alan Jr. has struggled to hit the back of the net or has been injured, we've actually struggled to score goals in the Segunda Division. So when we make the step up to La Liga, if Alan Jr. is not scoring, if we're struggling being in a tougher division, what ways would we have to develop the squad? And obviously you've also got to consider the reputation of the club. in your transfer policy then as well, that just because you're in the Premier Division doesn't mean you're going to attract the best players. Like Rayo Vallecano are the third team in Madrid. They're a club most certainly in the shadows of Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid in the city. As I say, like Vallecano represents a neighbourhood, Vallecas. And then as well, like when Vallecano were in the top division for a couple of seasons, they were also Paco Jiménez, the manager at the time, was noted for his strong performances from a side that really, really struggled financially. Like it's a club that's really on a small budget and traditionally works off a very small bank balance. So in terms of financial management, where some clubs you might look at Wolves coming up to the Premier League, RB Leipzig in Germany, these clubs, although there is a sustainability aspect to how they're purchasing players, are they also approaching it through the Leeds United model, where if we spend a lot of money in the summer to achieve this season, that the prize money we earn this season will offset what we spent in the summer, and then we spend again hoping the same thing happens. And obviously it's a case of, as Leeds showed, and I know a lot of Leeds fans are probably quite upset with me even talking about this, but it's a case of, if you miss out on your targets, having spent an awful lot of money, the financial implications can really, really, really cripple a club. Really, in 5 years you could be promoted, have achieved, peaked, and then all of a sudden, a collapse from inside happens. So with Vallecano, the option really isn't there to spend a lot of money. So financial management is going to have something as well that's going to be taken into careful consideration. Even at the start of the season, I had to sell our best player, Alex Moreno, because I knew financially the club would be in a very, very bad state towards the end of the year, because like that merchandising and television income isn't at a high level, even to cope with the demands of a squad in the second division. So like I take the advice of FM Catenaccio, who tweeted in when the question went out, who says he himself prefers a slow and steady build, that at Vallecano, that is something I'm really, really having to consider. And developing the squad, looking towards the youth, looking towards high potential players, and kind of taking the risk on these guys performing. Pablo Maffeo and Pedro Caravella will be staying again next season. They're on loan. Like, these guys are on loan from Man City and Liverpool, so we're loaning in guys, and like, unfortunately enough, we've been able to loan these guys in with a very, very small outlay in terms of contribution. Like, the only player we're actually contributing we have on loan to is Pablo and Silva, and we're paying 10% of his wages, if even. So, in terms of squad development, financial management, and transfer policy, I think there are really three key factors you really have to consider when you're going to crack the top. If you're taking over a team that's already in the top division and is kind of mingling about in the lower reaches, you can already establish, you can just kind of continue to build and set obviously smaller targets. Like with Vallecano, the target will be survival the first season. And anything more is a bonus. That's the way I'm approaching it, and like that's how I'm going to cope with expectations there. But when I think of other clubs who are already in the top division, how do you go about? Like, if you're taking over a side like maybe in the Premier League, you might be looking at a side like Crystal Palace. You might look at Huddersfield and Brighton this season in the Premier League. And as a credit to their managers, especially Huddersfield and Brighton, the squad development has been very, very clever. Like, they spent their money wisely as they come into the Premier League. You think of Bournemouth when they came up 8 million, their transfer record was broken to sign Tyrone Mings, the left back. And if you look at Bournemouth when they play most weekends, Tyrone Mings does not start at left back. So you do have to consider that if you are in the top flight, of course you're going to have a bit more money to spend than in the leagues further down the pyramid. So I think really scouting is going to play a really crucial part there. Pascal Gross was the top assists player in the Bundesliga last season, even though he played for Ingolstadt. So for Brighton to target a player like him, he really has contributed fantastically well to the Brighton team this season, and you can really see the impact a player like that has had. Again, what you think of Huddersfield and Aaron Moy in centre midfield, he's not he was a standout player for them on loan from Man City, and making the move permanent, it didn't upset the balance of the squad because you're already getting a player you already know. So in terms of building like that, if you loan signings, if they prove themselves, can also play a huge part there. The homegrown aspect is also something that really I think has to be considered, like in terms of squad development and financial management as well. You know, a lot of clubs out there are now putting more money into youth development, especially with financial fair play procedures even being in domestic leagues. So to look at a homegrown, look at what's already within your ranks and seeing, can you promote from within? Can you fill a gap from a player that's already there? As a lot of posts in FM18 have said as well, players under the age of 18 don't really benefit and develop from first team football. So is there any player like that 18, 19 years of age who you feel that they can fill the gap, and you can afford to take the risk on as well? Because of course there always is that risk element as well when you're looking to crack the top. That, like you think of Pascal Gross, you know, you are taking a risk on. Although he played very well in the Bundesliga, and the Bundesliga can be a very similar style to England, like you also have to consider the adaptation part of the process as well. And I also, and for me personally as well, I always kind of, if I am trying to bring in a player like that from a foreign league who's performed well, I'll always try and look at the language and his nationality to see if there's any other players in the squad who can help this player settle in and make a difference, you know, to help this player settle in straight away, so there's not any leave of absences, any issues there. Like I did have that issue with Danny Olmo at Benfica earlier on in FM18, where I signed him in January just to come in and give an extra rotation option out wide, and he ended up, he missed 6 weeks because he couldn't settle in. So of course, if you are looking to crack the top, that's also one aspect that really needs to be taken into account. And then the final note I have here in my own notebook then is the tactical changes. Like at Vallecano, like I said, we have the best defensive record in the league, and we also have one of the best attacking records. And obviously, when we get promotion next season, of course, you know, we're going to get against a higher caliber of defence, so our goals scored would you naturally expect to decrease, but you also then naturally expect your goals conceded to also increase because you're going to be going up against a higher caliber of attack. So the tactical changes, like I said, I do try and stick to an identity. I do try to stick to a style of play. So what tactical changes do you go about? And you know, do you go for the more defensive? Do you look like Stoke did when they come to the Premier League in 2008, and this very rigid and structured style of play that really kind of comes up, and it's, we're going to survive. We're not going to play pretty, but we're going to survive. You know, I think Burnley have also shown that as well. Like last season, they turned their Turf Moor into a fortress in the Premier League, and away from home, they, you know, the number of points they picked up was incredible when you consider they survived. And you look at them now this season, and they're just outside the European places. So I think again, Burnley are a fantastic example of how to naturally build a squad there. It's, you know, it's sticking to a really kind of, there's a defensive style, but there's also at the same time, you know, a very industrious attacking threat. There's the big men up front, there's the direct style, there's hard runners, you know, but they also have the likes, a bit of flair as well, the players who can contribute through a moment of magic. And you know, like, and it's a case of that's developed with them. So like, do you stick with the same approach? Do you go like Bournemouth, like an Eddie Howe, where okay, we're going to play football, we're going to stick to our style, and we're going to give it a go, and if we stay up, fantastic. It's just a thrill to be in the top division. Are you in a position with a club that you can take that approach? Well, like Eddie Howe obviously has that job security there at Bournemouth, where he could afford to take that approach. He could afford to run that risk. And again, like tactically, you have to think of, is there a strength that you have in your side that you could play to? You think of Stoke as well when they're promoted. The set piece threat they had was incredible. From corners, they're such a big and strong squad that from corners and free kicks, they were really, really a threat. And of course, then there also was the added element of the Rory Delap throw-ins. So is there something in your style of play that you can find that if you can really build an attack around as a goal-scoring threat from this one style of play, could you really stick to it? Is that enough to keep you up? So obviously, like, these are my thoughts, and this is how I'm thinking right now about approaching the Rayo Vallecano La Liga promotion chase that I'm currently in. And it's obviously a lot of us have also experienced that promotion push, that look to really build, take the outside club and achieve the top. Like, it doesn't take much to look around Twitter and Slack, YouTube, to see guys who've managed Sunderland, guys who are managing clubs, like really small clubs, and are challenging for Champions League, Europa League places consistently. And your blogs, your YouTube videos, your streams have also been like really, really interesting to read. And of course, anybody out there, I'd encourage to go out, and it doesn't take much effort really to find them. But like, it's a case of like, what are your thoughts? Like, is there anything you have to your game that you feel that if you're like me, you're sitting on the outside, you're preparing for a jump up, preparing to push higher up the league? Like, what aspects are you considering to really, turn your club into a top team? Are you going to go for the instant pump money in, transfers all in one go approach, or are you going to go for the sustainable growth? Like, what, like we're really, really interested to hear like a nice kind of conversation about this out there in the community. And speaking of the tactical changes, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I just want to say thank you to everybody out there for the just incredible response. My own recent piece on the tactics of Rayo Vallecano has gone down. It as if you're listening to the pod, it's taken a couple of weeks to kind of get all these ideas out on paper to really kind of share with you what's been going on and how the system has evolved into this more passionate and aggressive style of football, but also having the more slow or romantic style of football. So again, if you haven't read it, it's up there on my blog, gaffergramo.wordpress.com. But looking at the numbers, it's just incredible to see the actual reaction it's gotten. So I think most people out there have actually read it. So thank you very much, and the response I've gotten as well. Thank you. Like, again, and a few people have engaged in some discussion as well about some of the aspects of my system. Thank you very much there as well. But there just was one little aspect there that I did want to touch on, and that was, again, like I said, if you have a strength, you play to it. And talking about set pieces was, ever since Paul Scholes scored that goal against Aston Villa, that incredible volley at Villa Park from the edge of the box, the one thing I've always kind of set up to do in Football Manager is put a centre midfielder on the edge of the box for every kind of corner in every iteration of the game since, so like, we're talking 10 years now almost, and with the ultimate goal of being able to, for that midfielder to be ready to pounce on a loose ball on the edge of the box and finish it like Paul Scholes. And I just want to congratulate Santi Comesana of Rayo Vallecano for breaking my 10-year duck in a recent game. Like, again, corner came in, ball was headed out by the defending team. Comesana was just waiting there, and one bounce, and the man hit a volley straight into the top corner on the far side. So, like obviously, for future pods, I do have it written down to talk about set pieces and approaches, but the paying more attention to set pieces is something I have been doing recently in the tactical aspect of my game. reading blog posts out there about people who really do build their games about the tactical style of set pieces and their importance is something that's it's something an extra dimension I'm looking to add into the game. It's something I do kind of pride myself on defensively. Having been a goalkeeper myself, I know how I like to organise defenders in that situation. So in an attacking sense, it's nice to be able to see how we can exploit it. And in a future podcast, that is something I do have marked down as a discussion point. But as things go, as the half hour approaches that I do try and aim for with the pod, it is now time to tie the pod up and head into that last section, the scouting section. So I'd like to welcome you now to the latest iteration of the FM Notebooks Community Scout, with me, Gaffer Graham, of course. The purpose of the FM Community Scout is a quick promotion of some of the content I've seen published in the past week. If you create anything, please don't forget to use the hashtag #WeAreTheCommunity, and I'll try and feature some of your content in each episode. Links to all content will be found in the description box and in the tweets that followed this podcast on Twitter and, of course, on Slack. Now, this week I have been fairly tied up, and it's only been blogs that I've really been able to pay particular attention to. And there was 3 blogs that really kind of posted in the last week that really caught my eye in terms of reading. The first one came from Oliver Jensen at FM Football Manager, and he's written an incredibly detailed piece on his Parma side, and it's a really, really in-depth analysis of his style and how he's tactically moulding Parma into a style of play, how he really wants them to play the game, with a well edited and carefully selected graphics as well. It really does make for a really colourful and really interesting piece, and it's really well worth reading. So the link is there below if you do want to go and check that out over on his site. Liam1872 has given an update on his time at Shanghai Shangang. Now, it's really an offbeat save. It's a really, really interesting as well. I really enjoy kind of reading about people who are managing in countries that I don't know an awful lot about the leagues, where kind of I just know enough on the surface, scratch the surface. So it's really interesting to see how Liam has been getting on as he seeks to conquer in the Far East in a league that not many like myself would be too familiar with. So that then again is hosted on Liam's WordPress site. And then the final blog post I did see this week was from My FM Story, and he of course is on his Around the World in 80 Days Journeyman Save. So again, journeyman saves are very popular in the community, and they're always really, really interesting to read because everybody of course does them differently. Different opportunities obviously open up to everybody. So reading about his latest stop in Mexico was one I really, really enjoyed. And in every post he has, he racks up the miles, he adds them all up. So as Liam is jet setting and hopefully earning plenty of air miles there, it's really, really well worth in reading that post there. So this has been episode 4 of the FM Notebook with me, Gaffer Graham. I really, really want to say thank you again for all those people who have contributed, those people who have given their share and shared their thoughts with me on the posts in the last week and contributing to the FM Notebooks. Of course, it really wouldn't work without you guys. Episode 5 is next week. It's the last one in the pilots series that I have now. We'll see if there's an episode 6 afterwards. But episode 5 next week, we are going to be talking about 5 at the back. So tactical systems and tactical approaches where teams look to use a 5 at the back system. So I'd be really, really interested to hear your thoughts, share your posts about 5 at the back as we look to really kind of get into an in-depth talk about that. But until then, guys, I will catch you then. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next week.